He agreed to do the show, and of course, I couldn't wait to see that first stop motion animation shot of one of those lizard creatures doing its thing. And then I quickly learned the patience of being involved in a project that uses stop motion animation, because it was after we built the thing and spent the money for the armature and all, finally it was time to shoot. And there it is 5 days later, and he said, I got my first shot.
Hi, Mr. Charles Band. It is an absolute pleasure talking to you here with the Primevals. I'm glad you got to kind of join along. How have you been, my friend?
Super good. You know, it's in a business where you conceive a movie, get a script written, shoot it 60 days later, and it's out in 5 months. To talk about a movie that I was first introduced to 45 years ago and finally made 30 years ago and finally finished at the end of last year, it's just such a bizarro stretch. It's got to be pretty unique in show business.
It is perhaps the most important discovery of the century.
I'm also on my way this Friday to Fantasia in Montreal, so it's playing that film festival. Then there's several others, I forget their names, I'm sorry. And then we're going to Spain in October. So the truth is, and hopefully all this will ignite more interest and we'll make some good deals, but it probably means the movie itself won't come out till next year. So apropos, the movie that never sort of got completed till recently, even the sort of distribution part of this, which, you know, if it was just up to me and it was a simple, we would have had it out in January because the movie was finished late November. But it does deserve this sort of, you know, prestigious launch. So I'm excited about it.
So obviously David Allen was an old friend of yours. You know, you guys worked together in Laser Blast, Ghoulies 2, both the Oblivions, and many more. I mean, this guy was also doing Willow and Ghostbusters 2. Right. But you bonded over your sort of love of that sort of old practical effects. And even in your book, when you mention that the atomic bomb of the digital effects and Jurassic Park, you both knew that there was something still to the old way. Right. Can you touch about the importance of how you kept Primevals alive all these years and how you got to where you are now, releasing the film since the 70s?
You know you can't answer those questions without a living specimen.
Which requires an expedition.
That's a ridiculous story. Well, my first love was always for sci-fi fantasy, so huge fan, obviously going back to King Kong, but Jason and the Argonauts and Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and those magical stop motion animation shots were a big, you know, I don't know what the right word is anymore, but let's just say a turn on. It had a lot to do with what I love about these movies. Now, I wound up then making movies in the early to mid 70s that were more horror based, even though I made a few sci-fi movies as well. But I found that in my budget range and what I was capable of doing, the sci-fi canvas was a little too expensive. So if you look at my body of work so far, over 300 movies, most of them are horror films. Having said that, I was ready to make my first sci-fi movie back in the 70s called Laser Blast. And the dream was to find a way to create stop motion animation characters for these aliens who come to Earth and carelessly leave their laser blast gun for our kid to find it and get revenge on people who tortured him. Anyway, and I found my way, long story, to David Allen, who even at that point was well known. He had made a number of movies and I'd seen some of his work, and he was famous at the time. This is the 77, 78. He was the guy who had developed and animated the Pillsbury Doughboy. Of course, now it's all CGI, but back then it was a stop motion animation character for those commercials. Anyway, Dave and I got together. I said, Dave, I don't have the kind of money I'm sure you want, but can you please do the stop motion for Laser Blast? He had an incredible team, Dennis Muir and Phil Tippett, people who all went on to be huge, you know, special effects, you know, kings in their field. But back then he was working at a little studio in Burbank. He agreed to do the show. And of course, I couldn't wait to see that first stop motion animation shot of one of those lizard creatures doing its thing. And then I quickly learned the patience of being involved in a project that uses stop motion animation, because it was after we built the thing and spent the money for the armature and all, finally it was time to shoot. And there it is 5 days later. And he said, I got my first shot. come by and see it. It was literally a 4-second shot, and that's kind of the rhythm. But it was so magical. I thought, oh my God, this is it. This is it. At that time, Dave told me about his pet project, the Primevals. He said, oh, it's got 250, 300 stop motion shots, and it's going to take 12 to 14 weeks to shoot. We need to go to the Himalayas. Like, oh, well, I'm not exactly the right guy for that, but one day maybe we'll find a way to make it. And then as the story goes, briefly, I've worked with Dave on many movies during the late 70s, the 80s, Dolls, the first Puppet Master movies. And finally, around the mid 90s, it was time to, we were just doing well enough, Full Moon, to fund the Primevals. And we went out and shot it. It was a huge movie for us. I mean, our budgets are always well under $1 million. This was about a $4 million budget. But the real twist was, not only was it a 12-week shoot, and we went to the Italian Dolomites, and I had a studio in Romania at the time, and we built all these sets. The plan was shoot the movie and then spend 2 years doing 250 stop motion animation shots. 2 years. So imagine having that investment. The movie's done. Everyone's excited to see it. And then sadly, about 14 months into that 2-year program, Dave Allen dies of cancer. And that was at the exact same time that Full Moon's fortunes ebbed, which has happened many times in my career. And we had to box everything up. And it took all these years, up to maybe 4 years ago, to be back in a position where we can complete the work. So Chris Endicott, who was Dave's right arm guy, we put a team together, and once again, slowly but surely, 1 or 2 shots per week over the last 3-4 years, we finally finished the movie at the end of last year.
Nice speech.
Matt.
If we can discover how this creature crossed the genetic barrier from one life form to another, we'll unlock the mysteries of heredity.
And in the book, you actually mentioned how you would have lunches with Chris Endicott, and you guys would discuss the Primevals
Right.
kind of like over and over. I know obviously the entire thing couldn't be completed as Mr. Allen's script. So how did you guys decide like what was to be the movie in the end?
So for many years, as things got a little better for Full Moon, and we, after the death of the direct-to-video business, which practically, put a lot of people out of business, and we were hanging on by our short hairs. But with streaming, and luckily having sold everything to stay alive, I did not sell my library, and that became obviously what kept us going. And we got into streaming, and things started to, flourish again a little bit. So I kept meeting with Chris, and I'm saying, Chris, we've got to finish this movie. His sticking point was, well, we really need to finish it the way Dave would want to finish it, which would have involved way too many additional stop motion animation shots. I didn't have the budget, and I didn't want to spend the next 5 years or 10 years of my life still finishing Primevals. So we came up with a compromise that ironically, we wanted to finish most of the shots anyway, but the compromise was, okay, then let's finish 2 versions. One is, let's just say, the commercial version, which will be, there's a couple scenes that we can't have in there. One in particular with this lizard creature that attacks them. And then there's a few other moments, but not a lot. Let's not finish those scenes, but let's finish all the shots, all the missing links, all the pieces that would get us to the end of the movie. That'll be the commercial version, meaning we could exploit it, we can stream it, we can exhibit it. But in fairness to Dave, let's also finish his version, because he was meticulous in all his stop motion animation shots. Some of them are live stop motion animation boards. I'm sorry, I said the wrong thing. Storyboards. So basically, the sort of agreement was, yes, it'll be streamed as a commercial, the slightly shorter version, and it would be exhibited that way. But when we release the fancy Blu-ray box set, let's have 2 versions. Let's have the version that's the commercial version, the one that we're able to finish, so people who aren't in the business, who don't really understand any of this, will enjoy an amazing movie. And then let's have Dave Allen's version, also scored, also finessed in terms of sound, but that will include the storyboards of the few unfinished scenes, so people will get what the movie would have looked like had we shot every single scene and every single stop motion animation shot that Dave designed. So that's what's happening. So when this movie comes out, it'll be just that. There'll be I'm sure some theatrical they'll be streaming, and then when the Blu-ray box set comes out, people will be able to look at the version, the commercial version, and the one that will have Dave Allen's missing shots.
Can you get into the process of how you guys cleaned it up? Because I would say this is the first time I've seen a 90s full moon 4K, but it looks like it was shot yesterday, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. It's a movie as it gets released. It'll be the first time the movie's been released. Will look like a retro feature. It'll look like exactly as you describe it. Well, we shot it on 35. We had a fantastic DP, Adolfo Bartoli. So, these were beautifully lit shots. We had enough money to, find the right locations. A lot of it was shot in Romania. We built sets. As I said, we went to the Italian Dolomites. It was the only other movie I've made in my career that was close to that budget, not quite as much, was Stuart Gordon's Robot Jocks. That also was, for us, a several $1 million movie. Otherwise, the movies were much, much, much less expensive. So we had the budget to afford those locations. We had a great DP. Our average shoot back then, when we had more money, was 4 weeks. Now it's less than 2 weeks. Primevals was 12 weeks. And needless to say, the post-production time is decades. So, at the end of the day, I think it's all on the screen, but it has that vibe, it was shot then. And it's also Dave Allen's, his approach. He boarded the whole movie, not just the stop motion shots, but he really was meticulous in how he shot it. And it's kind of old school, all the tricks you would see today with cameras that weigh 2 pounds that you can fly around, they weren't used. So I think the style as well of both the direction and the way he used his camera to tell the story is kind of retro.
What are you two after? Tigers? Buffalo?
Something even more dangerous.
We're searching for a Yeti.
There's a part in the book, which I 100% recommend, is one of the greatest adventures that kind of stuck with me. And it was, you talked about the first to go, but I felt like this, in a weird way, encompasses sort of a long journey for Full Moon, because not only is this just you finish a movie, but it's almost honoring an old friend. But at this point, you're done. So where do you go from here? Being that one of the longest gestation movies and projects, and like I said, honoring somebody you love is done. What do you do now?
There was zero financial reason to finish this movie. We'd be lucky if we recover 5% of the budget in today's current, digital dime world. So as you said, the reason to finish this movie was because of the commitment and the love that Dave had for this project. And I've been asked a ton of times, well, why are you spending this? Even the cost to finish it is more than we'll probably bring back. So, there are reasons you do things, not always for money. Definitely Primevals is a good example. But, I hope that people who followed Full Moon and new fans, as we have new fans as well, and all the movies we're trying to be clever with that we're making right now, some of which I think are turning out really, really well, it'll hopefully, send a good vibe into the Full Moon universe. We have a couple of really interesting possible reboot deals brewing. Now, of course, everything's slowed down or stopped because of the writer's strike and the SAG strike. But in time, that'll turn around, and it'll be nice to see some of these movies like Trancers, which is one of them, get made. In the case of Trancers, into a really, hopefully, well-appointed series on one of the bigger streaming services. So, Primevals, I think, will live on. But yeah, it definitely. The other things we're doing. I love publishing Delirium. This is our 5th year. I think issue 34 is coming out. It's quarterly. Chris Alexander, who used to be the editor of Fangoria, has been the editor. He's a good friend. He's a big part of Full Moon. There's no financial reason today to publish whatever it is, a 52-page magazine. It's like when someone goes, well, Charlie, here's what it costs, and these are your subscribers. I say, yeah, but it's still cool. There are people who get that magazine and go, it smells like a magazine. You open it up. We give a lot of them away at conventions. So sometimes you just do things because it's what you dreamed of doing as a kid, not always because, oh, well, okay, we're not going to make money. So it's a bizarre long answer, but that's part of it.
No, but I do want to say though that, in this business, I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of grift, there's a lot of snakes. It's with any business, but it does mean a lot to me, and I think a lot to the Full Moon fans, that you've carried this torch for your friend this many years, and you've honored his legacy by finishing it, and finishing it well. And I'm excited for people to see it. It's a fantastic old school, stop motion animation flick. It feels like the 90s stuff. And to be very fair, I think you're kicking ass now. The new subspecies was fantastic. I actually love that people are coming around to, and you mentioned your book, to the coronavirus, corona zombies, that I know you got a lot of shit for at first, but then all of a sudden people start watching it and realize, oh, it's a fun joke. So I love that you guys are always sort of progressing, always kicking ass. And
well, I appreciate it. I'll give you two things. One, going back to Corona Zombies, which we made literally on the eve of the pandemic. Yeah, we were
I was there.
A lot of shit, but a lot of people recognize it for making fun at the time of how crazy the world was, and stealing toilet paper. The whole thing was silly enough. But I recently watched the movie again, and occasionally I get an odd post or a letter, email going, I watched this thing and I was afraid to for a while, but you were spot on. It was hilarious, this, that, and the other. I mean, it's a big nod to Woody Allen's What's Up, Tiger Lily, that we created this formula. But, sometimes it's not great to be so ahead of the times, and sometimes it's kind of fun. But my best worst story, which is probably, I think it's in the book, is after I sold Media Home Entertainment in the late 70s. I started Wizard Video. We had all these bizarre movies, big box films. We had Texas Chainsaw Massacre on Halloween. And then I thought, wait a minute, video games seem to be a cool thing. I wasn't even a video game guy, but Atari. So I thought, let me start Wizard Video Games. So I right away went to my friend the Carpenter, and I licensed Halloween, obviously through the distributor, and I licensed Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I developed, being a neophyte in that business, 2 Atari style video games, each with a little theme that is recognizable from the movie, little stick guys, completely ridiculous, but it was cool at the time. Spent a bunch of money, took, I don't know, 50 or 100 of each of these games to the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago, a lot of fanfare, PR. I thought, this is it. This is going to make tens of millions of dollars, and I'll be able to fund my movies. And I couldn't sell a goddamn unit. And the reason why is people would, first of all, these were little small buyers. It was like Sears. The buyers would come and say, you're crazy. Video games are for children.
You're ahead of the game.
This is not what people want. We'd be interested if it was about something fun, but this is not fun. You got so forget it. I could not sell these things, and I eventually gave some away. Of course, now they're worth a fortune, apparently, on eBay. A mid-condition Texas Chainsaws, thousands of dollars, Atari style video game. So that's an example of something that definitely was fucked up, because definitely lost a bunch of money, and I moved on and I made movies again. So, it's always a little bit of all of that. Thank you. And I'm going to end by saying, because I absolutely love Joblo, and it's awesome, I have something super cool that I've been biting my tongue not to talk about. But if you want to set up a time next week, maybe mid next week, I want to reveal and premiere this thing on your outlet, because it's super cool and very timely, apropos everything we're talking about.